Let's explore for a moment the real scale of the threat that this surveillance grid is intended to tackle. According to the National Counterterrorism Center, there were 25 American civilian deaths around the world as a result of terrorism in 2009. In 2008, there were 33. In 2007, 19. The majority of these casualties were in Iraq, following our unprovoked invasion and subsequent occupation of the country. Statistically, one has a greater chance of being struck by lightning or dying from a dog bite than from a terrorist attack. According to the 9/11 Commission report, the operating budget of Al-Qaeda is, by CIA estimates, approximately $30 million. This is equivalent to the cost of one U.S. military cargo helicopter, or what the U.S. spends in 4 hours in Iraq, and about 10 times less than the annual revenues of Ben & Jerry's ice cream company.
We have enemies out there, many of them imagined, some of them real, but even the real ones are magnified in our imagination.
In spite of all the exaggeration of its true threat to national security, the mass paranoia surrounding terrorism and the drumbeats of war that accompany it will never disappear. Even if all terrorist acts cease to occur, the idea of terrorism will never fade away, and there is good reason for this. Terrorism represents permanent war, and for the defense establishment, permanent war means permanent capitalization. At the end of the day, defense firms are private corporations seeking sustained sources of funding, and when it comes to the profit motive, the only exit strategy is bankruptcy. This is why private industry executives like the Defense Science Board, for instance, an organization that advises the Pentagon on technologies and policies, issued a report in September 2002 calling for the Pentagon to devise ways of provoking terrorists to carry out overt acts of terrorism so that they could be more easily targeted and thus neutralized, the board claimed.
Well, you see, this is the problem with terrorists. They're really inconsiderate when it comes to people's schedules.
In 1993, Defense Secretary William Perry hosted a private dinner for defense executives where he prepared them for the coming wave of consolidation. He predicted that half of the contractors would disappear. No one fretted. Once consolidation was underway, stocks soared, and a virtual market oligopoly was formed among the Big Five contractors. William Grider, author of such books as The Secrets of the Temple and One World, Ready or Not, writing in his 1998 book, Fortress America, stated that, quote, as a matter of politics, the three big boys, Lockheed, Boeing, and Raytheon, are already united in a cooperative competition that boils down to this: if one wins, all win. Thanks to the consolidation it encouraged, the Pentagon is now effectively married to an oligopoly of three mammoth corporations and obliged to keep them in good health even more visibly than it did for weak firms during the Cold War lulls. By downsizing in this manner, the military-industrial complex may now be treated, like certain major banks, too big to fail. The war on terror has worked consummately for those standing to gain from war and the expansion of empire. Defense spending is up, and the U.S. has taken over a resource-abundant and geopolitically critical region of the world, expanding the reaches of the Republic further than any empire in history. Since 9/11, the U.S. has waged two large-scale wars in the Persian Gulf in their brazen search for terrorists. It has established 14 new military bases in the process. This network of bases is, as Chalmers Johnson writes in his monumental work, The Sorrows of Empire, a sign not of military preparedness, but of militarism, the inescapable companion of imperialism.
Heads up, the U.S. convoy is still en route.
Once upon a time, he laments, you could trace the spread of imperialism by counting up colonies. America's version of the colony is the military base. The building of new military bases in conquered territory abroad has replaced old colonial practices as the modern method of imperial expansion.
I don't know if you know that they're building bases across the Middle East and elsewhere that will last over 100 years with the building techniques they're putting into them. And this follows along a strategy plan first put across by Jean Kirkpatrick, who was brought up in a socialist, actually really communist school, if you go into her history. And Ronald Reagan picked her up. And after hearing her speak at the American Jewish Congress, talking about this very project, the need to, instead of going to war and setting up temporary bases, America's role would be maybe 50, 60, 70 years long. Therefore, why don't we go and build permanent bases? Reagan picked her up and put her on a panel for this, and that was the start of the creation of the permanent bases across the world.
So we got up there at 4 in the afternoon. They came and picked us up, took us inside the camp where we got accredited. I had to buy a new pair of boots. They've got little the Midwest America there, with streets like 1st and 2nd and 53rd and so on. You could be in a little town in the Midwest. They had shops there, Starbucks coffee, ice cream shops, clothing shops. And I went into this clothing shop, which was just like a little store on 5th Avenue. It was just amazing, where I had a selection of buying a new pair of shoes or a pair of boots.
The political philosopher Hannah Arendt once wrote, "The central political idea of imperialism is expansion as a permanent and supreme aim of politics." Unfortunately, this notion of permanent war is nothing new. It goes back to the early post-war period, when armed hostilities galvanized defense expenditures, leading to the inception of the formidable military-industrial complex that was the subject of both Eisenhower's and C. Wright Mills's warnings.